Hello. I see you can't stay away from Redwall, so come along as we enter Chapter 17. Rhaegar was hopelessly lost. Separated from Cluny, he could not think for himself. Scuttling off down the road in the wrong direction, he kept on going in a state of funk. Frightened by the sound of a bird chirping suddenly, he rushed blindly into Mossflower Wood and pressed on, deeper and deeper into the strange new territory. It was only with the arrival of a pale dawn that he stopped, slumping down under some bushes. Exhausted, soaking wet, and dispirited, he curled up into a wretched damp ball and slept. Sometime about mid-morning, Rhaegar was awakened by the sound of footsteps. As Mathis trampled past, he lay low, silently congratulating himself. What a find! A little mouse. He would take him prisoner and bring him back alive to Cluny. That way he could gain some prestige. Cluny might even forgive that he panicked and deserted the abbey. Mathis whisked a swift glance over his shoulder. There was a rat clumsily trying to stalk him. A fat, awkward-looking rodent, but nonetheless an enemy. The young mouse strode onwards, his mind working coolly and without fear, confident that he could handle the situation. Breaking twigs underfoot, stumbling and emptily from tree to tree, Rhaegar watched the mouse and fantasized. There were 6 of them, Chief. They tried surrounding me, but I fought like a devil. Then I says to myself, Rhaegar says, Then I says to myself, Rhaegar, says I, you better capture this last one and fetch him back for the chief to question. Then Chaniel said to me, Rhaegar, good old Rhaegar, I knew I could depend on you. Why do you suppose, old Rhaegar? I knew I could depend on you. Why do you suppose I took you along in the first place? Make fur, bring food and wine for my old pal Rhaegar, the brave. Yes, then I'll pat the chief on the back and say, But Satan's whiskers, you old rodent, have you never thought of retiring and let me lead the horde? Why, with a gallant warrior like me and come twack! A long whip lurch branch sprang forward suddenly. It crashed into Rhaegar's head, paralyzing him. Mathis stepped out of hiding, rubbing his hands. It'd been a strain holding the branch back for so long. Uncoiling Shadow's climbing rope, he bound Rhaegar's paw and claw to a sturdy oak. The young mouse could not afford to wait around for the rat to regain his senses. There was still a deal of traveling to be done. He pressed onward, leaving his senseless enemy bound to the tree. The rain stopped. Within minutes, the hot June sun burst down on Mossflower, as if in apology for its absence. Clouds of steaming mist arose from the woodland floor, mingling with the golden shafts slanting down through the trees. The birds began singing. Each flower and blade of grass was decked out in jeweled pedantry with necklace of sparkling raindrops. The sudden warmth flooded over Mathis, cheering him onward. Humming a tune beneath his breath, he strode out with a will, almost breaking from the cover of the trees, straight out into the flat meadowland. He checked himself just in time. Directly overhead lay a vast overgrown area, which was neither pasture nor meadow. It was the common land that had once belonged within the curtilage of St. Ninan's. Mathis crouched at the edge of the woods. He could see the back of the church. There were 10 or 12 rats patrolling it, some distance away. Before he dealt with that problem, there was still the common land he had to be crossed. Clumps of thistle and slate ground hammocks would be his only cover. The young mouse spoke his thoughts aloud. This could present a little problem. A strange voice answered him. Problem? A little problem? Well, at least it's not a full-grown adult problem. Mathis squeaked aloud with fright. Whirling about, he looked for the source of the mysterious voice. There was no one about. Taking a grip of himself, he squared his shoulders and called out boldly, "Come out here this instant and show yourself." The voice answered. It seemed to be coming from directly in front of him. "Show meself, indeed. How many pairs of eyes did you want, young feller? Fine state of affairs. Bless me soul. What? Mathis narrowed his eyes and looked hard. Still nothing. I warn you, come out and show yourself, he shouted irritably. I'm in no mood for playing games. As if by magic, a lanky hair popped up beside Mathis, an old patchwork creature. His fur was ashen hue, with blots of gray and light brown fleck white on the underbelly. He was very tall, with formidable, hefty hind legs, and a comical pouched face topped off with two immense ears, which flopped about of their own accord. With a courtly, old-fashioned manner, the hair made a leg bowing gracefully, his voice carrying a slightly affected quiver. Basil Stagg Hare, at your service, sir. Expert scout. Hind leg fighter, wilderness guide, and camouflage specialist. Liberator of tender young crops, carrots, lettuce, and other such beasts. Pray tell me whom I have the pleasure of addressing, and please state the nature of your little problem. Mathis decided the particular hare was either slightly mad or tipsy, but his outmoded manner was certainly friendly. The young mouse humored him accordingly, bowing low with a paw at his waist. Good day to you, Mr. Basil Stagg Hare. My name is Mathis. I am a novice in the order of Redwall mice. My immediate problem is to cross this land to the church over yonder without being discovered by the rats who are guarding it. Basil Stagg Hare tapped one of his huge feet gently on the ground. Mathis, he laughed. What an odd name, to be sure. The young mouse laughed back as he replied, Not half as odd as your own name. Who ever heard of a hare being called Basil Stag? The hare disappeared momentarily. He reappeared next to Mathis. Ah, well, hare's the family name. Don't you know? My parents named me Basil, though the old mater wanted me to be called Columbine Agnes. Always longed for a young lass, she did. But why stag? No, noble creatures, stags. There aside. Did I ever tell you I wanted to be one? A magnificent royal stag with great coat hanger antlers. So when I went down to the jolly old river one night and christened myself Stag, had 2 toads and a newt as witness, you know. Oh, yes. Mathis was unable to hide his merriment. He sat down and chuckled. Basil started chuckling too. He sat down beside Mathis. I think I'm going to like you, my boy, he cried. Now what about getting you to the church? Why, there's nothing simpler. But enough time for that later, young whip. How about telling me what brings you here? I love listening to good yarn. You know. Oh, by the way, I hope you like fennel and oat cakes. Of course you do. You'll share lunch with me, of course you will, young un like yourself. In a flash, Basil had lugged a half-sack from the undergrowth and was springing a repast on the grass between them. For the next half hour, Mathis related his story between mouthfuls of the hare's tasty luncheon. Basil listened intently, interrupting only when he required clarification on some points. Mathis finished his tale and sat back awaiting comment. Basil's long ears flopped up and down like railway signals as he digested his food and his friend's information. Rats. I knew that they'd come eventually. Through intelligence on me grapevine, you know. Could feel it in the old ears, too. As for Redwall, I know it well. Excellent type. Abbot Mortimer. Splendid chap. I heard the Joseph Bell tolling out the sanctuary message. Even had some cheeks old hedgehog tell me to run for it. Couldn't go, of course. Dear me, no. That'd never do. Chap deserting his post, but of a bad show. What? I prefer my own company, you know. Present company accepted. Of course. Oh, of course, Mathis agreed. He had taken enormously to the hare. Basil sprang up in a smart military fashion and saluted. Right, first things first. Must get you across to the church. Young feller, me mouse, I say that green thingamajig you're wearing. Habit, isn't it? Capital camouflage. You're just trying to lie down anywhere in the shadows. Believe you me, you'd have trouble finding yourself. Top hole cover, absolutely. Basil stopped and murmured for a moment. His ears lay flat, stood up, then pointed in opposite directions. He continued, "Now, when you liberate yourself, your bit of tapestry or whatever, make straight back across the common. I'll be waiting. Never fear. Good. Well, come on, young bucko. We can't sit down here all day, like two fat rabbits and at a celery tree. Up and at 'em. Quick's the word and sharp's the action. Nip it about a bit, young un." Again, Basil vanished, only to reappear 3 yards out on the common. "Come on, Mathis. Track it to the left and wheel to the right. Bob and weave. Duck and wiggle. Look, it's easy." Mathis hurried to follow, keeping in mind Basil's instructions. Surprisingly, they seemed to work perfectly, and before long the two friends had covered nearly 3/4 of the common land. Mathis could even count the whiskers of the rats on some of the rats. He covered his mouth with a paw to struggle a giggle. "It's really very simple, isn't it, Basil? How am I doing?" Their hair bobbed up and down. "Capital, bingo. Like a duck in water, young feller. Flop me ears if you aren't the best pupil I've ever had. By the way, is there anything I can do to help?" Mathis stopped and looked serious. "Yes, there is, Basil. But I feel reluctant to ask you to involve yourself in my fight." Basil Stag Hair snorted. "Rubbish. My fight indeed. Do you fondly imagine that I'd sit there munching on the old nosebag while some ugly great rodent and his band of yahoos run about conquering my countryside? Never. Never let it be said." In the mess of Basil Stag Hair was backward in coming forward. "Ask away, Mathis, young commandrin." The hair puffed out his narrow cheeks, or narrow chest, and stood with paw on heart, his eyes closed and ears standing straight up. He awaited orders. The young mouse hid a smile at Basil's noble pose, and admiredly, "Oh, Mr. Hare, do you look heroic standing like that? Thank you." Basil opened one eye and looked at himself. Yes, he did look rather gallant. A bit like the monarch of Glen, or the stag at eve. Not that a young mouse must understand anything of that nature. Mathis expressed his wishes to the stag. "Would it be possible for you to create some kind of diversion while I'm getting the tapestry? Could you keep the rats occupied, Basil?" The hare twitched his ears confidently. "Say no more, laddie. You'd come to the right stag. Listen carefully. You cut across the flank to their left. They took a piece of planking out of the fence by the latch gate. That's where you slide through when you've got what you've come for, then make your exit the same way. I'll be somewhere about keeping an eye on you. Right off you go." Mathis went swiftly, still remembering to bob and weave as Basil had taught him. He made it with ease to the fence, glancing back to check on his companion. Basil went into a speedy run. He cleared the fence top with a bound and tapped the nearest rat on the back. "I'd say, old thing, where's the leader feller? Cluny or Looney, whatever you call him?" Completely staggered, the rat stood a slack-jaw. Basil left him and popped up beside another rat. "Phew! Dear, don't you claps ever take a bath? Listen here, you dreadful creature. Do you realize that you smell so high to high heaven? By the way, did your parents ever call you Pongo, or did they smell as bad as you?" It took the rat sensory as a moment or two to recover from their surprise. Then they let out yells of rage and tried to seize the impudent hare. It was like trying to catch smoke with their claws. Basil ran rings around them, keeping up a steady stream of insults and adding to the rat's bad temper. They shouted angrily, "Grab that big skinny rabbit, lads. Big skinny rabbit yourself, cat's meat. I'll stick his damn guts on my pike. Temper, tunt. Such language. If your mother could hear you. Blast, he's slippery as greased pig. Some of my best friends are greased pigs. Bottlenose. Oops, missed me again. Oh, you butterfingers, you." Mathis chuckled quietly and shook his head in admiration. He watched 12 rats rolling over each other and bumping heads as they chased his friend around the common land. Every now and then Basil would pause and strike his noble stag attitude, letting the rats get to within a whisker of him. Nimbly he would kick it out with his long, powerful legs and send all of them sprawling in a heap. Adding insult to injury, he danced around the fallen sentries, sprinkling them with daisies until they arose, cursing him, and to continue to chase. Worried that there might be other rats about, Mathis climbed into the church through a broken stained glass window. He dropped down into the Lady Chapel. The young mouse wrinkled his nose in disgust. The beautiful old church was rank with heavy odor of rats. Furniture was overturned. Stationery broken, walls stained. The pages of torn hymn books lay about everywhere. Where was the fragment of tapestry? And where was Cluny with the rest of his army? Instant realization sent a laden weight thudded into the pit of Mathis's stomach. They had gone to attack Redwall. Cluny must have the tapestry with him. Mathis felt sick as the thought. Hastily he climbed back out of the window. Halfway across to the fence, he noticed a small shed. Somebody was pounding upon it. It's a locked door, and calling his name aloud. "Mathis, quickly, over here, in the hut." Though a small gap in the door, he could see the Vole family. Their paws were tightly bound. Colin Vole huddled pitifully on some dirty sack in the corner, while Mr. Abram Vole and his wife battered away on the door with their paws tied together. Mathis called through the crack, "Stop banging. Stay quiet. I'll have you out of there as soon as I can break the lock." Mathis cast about for something that would force the padlock and hasp. Doubtless some rat had the key, but there was no time for that. By the stroke of luck, he found an iron spike that had been thrown at Basil by one of the rats. Forcing the spike in the hoop of the lock, Mathis levered away. "It's not budging," he muttered. From the corner, Colin Vole started to weep aloud. "Oh well, we'll be locked in here until Cluny gets back. I don't want to face him again. Do something, Mathis. Save me." Despite the Vole's wrenching predicament, Mathis could not help showing his contempt for Mathis. "Do stop whining, Colin. It doesn't help matters, and keep your voice down. There may still be rats about. Try to be brave like your mom and dad." In his frustration, Mathis swayed the spike at the lock. It bounced off, lodging deep between the hasp and the woodwork. He grunted in exasperation, pulling it savagely towards himself to loosen it. Taken off balance, he went head over tail. The hasp had broken. It came away, bringing with it some twisted, rusted screws. The door swung open. Drawing his dagger, Mathis hastily cut the bindings from the paws of the Voles, ensuing orders as he worked. "Follow me and do as I say. Move as quickly and quietly as you can." Cautiously, they slid through the broken fence and began making their way across the common. There was no sight of the rats' sentients. Mathis guessed that they were off somewhere, still trying to catch the elusive hare. It was mid-afternoon. The common was peaceful and sunny. Butterflies perched on thistle flowers, and grasshoppers centered each other with their ceaseless cadence. Abraham Vole insisted on shaking Mathis by the paw and congratulating him. "Mathis, thank you, with all my heart, for saving my family. We thought we were doomed." The young rescuer grinned. "We're not back home yet, by any means, Mr. Vole. And even if we do make it back to the Abbey, I dread to think what we may find." Mrs. Vole nodded vigorously. "Aye, we saw them leave the church to march on Redwall. Cluny was leading the villains with Martin's picture tied to his banner. Oh my, you never did see how many wild rascals in your born days." Mathis' brow ceased to worry frown. "I wish I hadn't sneaked off from the Abbey this morning. I do hope Constance has all the defenders on the alert." It was only seconds later that Mathis wished he had also been on the alert. The sensitive rats had become tired of chasing Basil. Wearily, they made their way out of the woods and back to the common land. They sat down on the grass behind the low hammock, taking a break together. Mathis and the Vole family, walked straight into the middle of them. Until next time, we'll pick up on Chapter 18. Until then, toodle.